So let us start the program. Hello everyone, good evening and welcome to today's program, which is a panel discussion on civil services as an excellent career option for law students. This event has been organized by Law Center 2 in furtherance of a series of programs being held to commemorate the year-long Golden Jubilee celebrations of Law Center 2, the Center for Excellence in Legal Education in India. Law Center 2 boasts illustrious alumni consisting of ministers, governors, judicial officers, bureaucrats, police and defense personnel, professionals such as doctors, engineers, pilots, chartered accountants, and many. And our ex-students have always been extremely focused whenever it comes to doing something for the benefit of our center and its students. In the same pattern, today's event has been organized by LC2 in collaboration with B and by an I.A.S, which is a venture by two of our former students, Mr. Jasbir Singh Bajaj, I.A.S officer, and Miss Sunita Suman, an educationist. Last month, we had organized a panel discussion on how to ace law exams. Now, taking it a notch higher, we have organized this panel discussion on civil services as an excellent career option for law students. When I had this topic in mind, I contacted Miss Sunita Suman to explore the possibility of organizing such an event. She immediately started working on this and brought on two of the most illustrious alumni of Law Center 2, Mr. Varun Mehta, Secretary to Government of India, Department of Justice, Ministry of Law and Justice, and Mr. Jasbir Bajaj, who has taken BARUN from I.A.S after having served in various capacities and accomplishing numerous prestigious assignments. I discussed this program with Professor Mahavir Singh. So when I discussed this program with Professor Mahavir Singh, the professor in charge of Law Center 2, he promptly gave us the permission to arrange this event, and here we are. So till the time Sunita joins, I would request our professor in charge, Professor Dr. Mahavir Singh ji, to please welcome and introduce our panelists.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Vageshwari Deshwal ji. A very warm welcome to all of you. Today is a special day for the sake of celebration of Golden Jubilee of Law Center 2. Because we have among us our two distinguished panelists from civil services, and they are the alumni of our Law Center 2. So let me take this privilege to introduce to you Shri Varun Mehta ji, I.A.S Secretary to Government of India, Department of Justice, Ministry of Law and Justice. I am feeling honored in sharing that Shri Varun Mehta ji not only an alumnus of Law Center 2, but also topped his batch despite of his heading very sensitive and demanding departments of the government. He is an extremely intelligent I.A.S officer of 1987 batch, Manipur cadre. During his long and distinguished tenure, he had been handling key positions in various departments of Government of India, such as Additional Secretary, Ministry of Defense. He had also served in Rashtrapati Bhaman for more than 9 years, which is perhaps the longest one served by any other officer. Presently, he is Secretary to Government of India, Department of Justice, Ministry of Law and Justice. Let me now introduce to you Mr. Jasbir Singh Bajaj, I.A.S, 1987 batch, Tamil Nadu cadre. He is also an alumnus of our center, Law Center too. After serving the state government for more than 3 decades, he took voluntary retirement from service in the apex scale, that is the scale of Chief Secretary, in December 2018. He holds the distinction of having served in Delhi as Resident Commissioner of Tamil Nadu for more than 15 years. A record of it showed in the I.A.S. academically. He has an extremely strong background with 5 master's degree, 2 in law, LLM from Indian Law Institute, MBL from National Law School, Bangalore, 2 in management, MBA from IIFT, and MMM from Pondicherry University, in addition to an MA in Public Administration from Punjab University. He is an accredited civil or commercial mediator with CIMI Singapore and CMC UK. He is presently pursuing PhD in law from GLA University. He had himself cleared the civil services exam 1986 with law as his optional in both prelims as well as mains in his only attempt. He is presently the director PN by I.A.S and is monitoring and guiding the civil services aspirants by personally coaching them on law optional and general studies. Out of 14 aspirants guided by him for the personality test of civil services exam in 2020, 10 have very proudly been successful in making it to a various services. Now I also welcome uh, Sunita Sumanji. She's had been also remained our alumni at Law Center 2, who has taken a keen interest to organize this program as a part of Golden Jubilee of Law Center 2. I invite them to share their valuable experience of decades in civil services with our students, particularly with special focus on the topic of the today. I pay my wholehearted thanks both of them for sparing themselves for their own center their from their busy schedule, and hope that both of our esteemed guests will make a chain of discussion at our center or at their own center, Law Center 2, in future also. I also pay my sincere thanks to my worthy and esteemed colleagues who are present today, and also pay my thanks to Professor Vageshwari Deshwal and members of her organizing team. So best wishes for grand success of the today's event. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Mahavir Sir, for introducing and welcoming our distinguished guests. So I would invite Mr. Varun Mehta ji to please address our students.
Professor Mahavir Singh ji of Campus Law Center 2, Professor Vageshwari Deshwal, CEO of BN by I.A.S. Sunita Sumanji, and my esteemed friend and batchmate, Mr. Jasbir Singh Bajaj. At the very outset, a very, very warm good evening to the organizers. The technical glitches notwithstanding, my fellow speakers as well as participants. At the very outset, I must say that I feel quite humbled to be a speaker today, especially because I have Professor Mahavir Singh there on the screen, and he has been my professor, and I have very fond memories. And I still remember the booming voice with which he used to take the class. And in fact, he used to take the classes on constitution, and I must say that that used to be my favorite subject also, because those days I used to serve in the office of the president, and uh, Professor Mahavir Singh ji used to take classes on the appointments in the higher judiciary, and therefore it was great interaction with him. And I'm also delighted that I have Mr. Jasbir Singh Bajaj. In fact, he's not only been a very, very good friend of mine, but also a batchmate of mine, and I feel dwarfed in front of him. He has a string of academic qualifications, and I hope one will try and match up to his qualifications. Now, insofar as today's topic is concerned, honestly speaking, I have also not prepared anything in a very formal or in a structured manner, because I thought it was more in terms of interaction with the students. The topic, of course, is civil services as an excellent career option for law students. Well, unlike Mr. Bajaj, who did take the civil services examination with law as one of his papers, I, of course, had history and sociology as my paper, and law is a degree which I acquired much later during the time of my service. But I must say that insofar as law being a paper that if anyone tries to take it for the civil services, I'm not very familiar with the examination pattern right now, the kind of questions which come. But one thing, of course, is there that if you are a law graduate or a postgraduate, and then you join the civil services, I think the exposure to law and the legal knowledge is something which is going to be very, very helpful for the person after he gets selected to the civil services. And when I mean civil services, I'm not only talking in terms of the I.A.S, I'm talking in terms of any of the services, whether it is the Indian Police Service, whether it is the Indian Forest Service, whether it is the Indian Revenue Service. The knowledge of law, it gives you such a wide spectrum and such great opening of horizon that you start seeing things and understanding things and comprehending things in a much, much incisive manner and in a much, much holistic manner. And that is because from the day that perhaps you join the service, uh, most of the work that you do, especially in the beginning years of your career, it is to some extent quasi judicial. If you are in the I.A.S, you are handling revenue matters. So you sit over as the district magistrate, you are looking into the land records, the mutation issues. So you are almost like holding a court. And though it is quasi-judicial in nature, one did realize that if those who had a background of law, for them, going ahead with this kind of a work was like a knife through butter. It was so simple. But for many of us who didn't have a grounding of law, we really had to make that extra effort to see that we picked up on the job. And this is all the more true because before joining the Indian Administrative Services, I was in the Indian Revenue Service in the income tax for 2 years. And I still remember that when I actually finished my training and I went to the field, and when the assessment dockets used to come, I was quite petrified of the papers. On one hand, I was pretty poor in maths and accountancy, and you had the balance sheets thrown at you, and then you had the Income Tax Act, I think, which is perhaps one of the most complicated act with so many provisos, and the second proviso and the non-obstante provisions. So at the end of the day, one realized that even in the academy, the emphasis which is given on law and also the papers relating to the field of law, that needs to be taken up very, very seriously so that one does well in one's job. And then again, when you move from the field postings to the secretariat, when you get involved in the policy formulation and the policy making, there at every stage, again, the knowledge of law uh, is a big, big advantage. More so because whether you are in the state government or whether you are in the center, you have to at times, many of these policy formulations have to be backed by some kind of a statutory enactment, and then you are responsible for the legislative proposals. And unless and until you have a good grounding of law, uh, it is quite a difficult territory to sort of enter into. If you have a law background, then you are very, very confident in handling, especially when it comes to the drafting of the legislation. Though, of course, you have a specialized legislative department to help you in that. But as a preliminary step, you have to do the groundwork in your own department. The other thing that you have to also keep in mind is that uh, when you are working in the government, most of the time you are dealing with rules and regulations, and it is the regulatory framework that is very important. And quite often there are issues of interpretations and counter interpretations, and that is where again a law student can feel absolutely at home, and it becomes much easier for the person to sort of understand and comprehend those issues. Uh, Even the basic constitutional precepts, which we need to know while we are functioning as part of the executive, whether it is in terms of separation of powers, whether it is the rule of law, and even the uh, basic precepts of the Constitution, which are like a guiding post when we are serving. This is, of course, something that even whether you are a student of law or even your general studies exposure, that is sufficient enough to give you the signals and the pointers of how you should move. So now The other important thing is you have what we call the delegated legislation and subordinate legislation, which again becomes the domain of the executive. And there again, if you have the knowledge of law, and especially administrative law and the principles of jurisprudence, that comes in very, very handy when you are actually on the job. More importantly, I will say that when I moved to as Joint Secretary in the Ministry of Shipping, and I was also Additional Secretary in the Department of Defense Production. There, when you are taking up, infrastructure projects, and there are not many cases where you have to go in for projects through the PPP model, where the contractual commitments are involved, contractual provisions are involved, the concessioner's commitment is involved. There again, and there I will say that by that time I had already been a student of law. I had passed out of Campus Law Center 2, and it really was a very, very big help for me to understand things better. Similarly, when you are in these kind of positions, you are on the board of many of the public sector undertakings. You are also on the board of many of the trusts, because in shipping I was there in the many of the major port trusts of the country, and much of it is legalese. And there again, anyone who is taking law as a subject and then making it to the civil services, it is going to be a big boon for him. Uh, well, I'll keep it only at this much, and then I would like to listen to the other panelists. And then, if there are other issues, I would like to respond accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Varun Mehta, sir. I.A.S. Secretary to Government of India, Department of Justice, Ministry of Law and Justice, for enlightening our participants about your diversified experiences as a civil servant and as an alumni of Law Center 2. I'm really honored and highly privileged to get this opportunity to share screen with our distinguished panelists and our professors, and in fact, more thrilled with the idea that we all are alumni of this great institute, Law Center 2. Now, I would like to take this opportunity to invite Jasbir Singh Bajaj sir, former I.A.S. 1987 batch, Tamil Nadu Cadre, who is also director of BN by I.A.S. and he has taken voluntary retirement from services and started this institute BN by sir. Over to Jasbir Singh Bajaj sir.
Thank you, Sunita. I hope I am quite audible and the video quality is also fine. Now, I'm really grateful to Professor Mahavir Singh ji, our professor in charge, Law Center 2, Faculty of Law, Delhi University, and I'm really grateful to Professor Vageshwari Deshwal ji, and both of them have been my teachers, my guides, my mentors rather. Because as Barun has said, Barun being my batchmate and a close friend in the civil service, and otherwise also I can take the liberty by calling him by his first name, if Barun permits me. Okay. Now, friends, I have very nostalgic memories of my days in Law Center 2, and I had the privilege and honor of having learned, as Barun had done, Constitution from Professor Mahavir Singh. And the manner he taught us Constitution, in fact, he rather guided us on various provisions of the Constitution in such a detailed and simplified manner that it seems that it has embedded into our minds. Professor Vageshwari taught me criminal law just for one session, but very, very impressive teacher, guide, and mentor. I'm really grateful to both of you. Thank you very much. Now, friends, Barun has given an insight into the advantages of having a law background in the civil services. Now, I will focus my brief talk on how it is beneficial and easy for a law student to enter the civil services, which I have learned not only now when I am heading and I am guiding the aspirants, but when I myself took the examination in way back in 1986. I was a police officer before that. I served in CBI for 5 years from 1980 to 85. And that was when I got my first exposure to law. Then such was the passion for law that even when I was not having a law degree, basic LLB, I opted for law as my optional in both prelims as well as mains, and I was lucky enough to clear the examination, 1986 examination, in my first and only attempt, getting 89th rank and being a colleague of Barun. Now, friends, how it is helpful for the students, law students, to get into the civil services as compared to other students opting for other subjects. I have done a brief study from the data which I have collected from UPSC itself for 3 years, 2015, 2016 and 2017, because the later data is still awaited. And I would share a couple of slides with you on doing a little comparison as compared to other subjects which one can opt for in the mains examination, how it is beneficial for law students to get into the civil services. So let me share the first slide. Please. Yeah. So friends, this is a comparative bar statement about if you can see in 2015, 16, 17, 3 years for which the data is available, the highest success ratio is that of law students, law optional subject, as compared to any other subject which is being offered generally by the aspirants. And on an average, if you see, there also law stands at number 1. Now, it has got certain other advantages. If you look at this particular slide, you will see that in the general studies papers and the essay paper, the average marks obtained by the aspirants is almost in the same ratio. But when it comes to the optional subject, that makes the difference in the final selection. So here also, if you see, if you score well, that is 300 plus marks out of 500 in your optional subject, which is very easy to do in the case of law as optional subject. So if a person like me who had no exposure, the academic exposure to law, if I could clear the examination with law as my optional subject, this is even proved in the present times also. The other advantages is overlapping of law optional with other general studies papers in the mains examination. If you see, there are 3 papers out of 5, total 7, but 2 optional if we take out, then out of 5 papers, there are 3 papers which have got a lot of overlapping with the law optional syllabus, and they are General Studies 2, General Studies 3 partly, and essay paper, because essay paper is basically on the writing skills. Now, if we look at the, just a minute. It is, yeah. So, if we look at law optional and the general studies paper, you will see the entire syllabus of general studies 2 is polity and governance, administrative law, constitutional law, which is almost 60 to 70% of law optional paper 1. And then there is international law, which is covered in paper 1 of, so entire law optional paper 1 covers the 100% of general studies paper 2. That saves a lot of time for the aspirants to prepare. So as regards paper 3, there is environment, which is the main subject. So we study environment law as a separate topic in our law optional paper 2. So, and then the next is about the essay. I have already told that it helps in developing, law particularly helps us in developing our writing skills, and there it helps in the essay paper also. So if we look at the, even in the prelims this year, which was conducted only 10 days back on 10th of October, you see 18% of the question, 18 questions out of 100 are related to constitutional and other provisions of law. So 18 means 18 into 2, 36 marks in prelims, and the cutoff percentage is roughly about 98 to 100 marks. So if you are able to score 36 marks very easily, if you have a law background, definitely your chances of getting into the services or going to the next stage of the examination means are very, very bright. Law students have been performing very well even in the personality test, as we have seen. Out of the 14 aspirants who were rather guided by me, mentored by me, out of 14, 10 have been selected in the final list, 3 of them in proper I.A.S. So this is the importance of the law optional paper for law optional in the civil services examination. So those law students definitely have a clear edge over other aspirants. Yes, law has been, extremely helpful to us in our civil services. As Varun said, we start our career as a SDM, subdivisional magistrate, become district magistrate, hold different positions in the secretariat and outside, and finally we land up in higher positions where we take part in the policy formulation. Of course, policy formulation is the prerogative of the political executive. But yes, our inputs do help. And that is where knowledge of law, a thorough, in-depth knowledge of law is of great help to civil servants throughout our career of more than 3 decades. So with this, I'll conclude my remarks, and then I will listen to the other panelists also. Thank you.
Thank you, Jasbir Singh Bajaj, sir, for sharing your experiences, and I'm sure that the law students are inspired and motivated. It was a great experience today. Now I am having some questions from the students. The first question is for Jasbir Singh Bajaj, sir. How relevant are the subject of LLB while writing civil services examination?
Well, Friends, I have already done a detailed analysis of how law as a subject, as an academic subject, has been helpful in the civil services examination. I don't think I need to elaborate anything more on that. Yeah.
The second question is for Varun Mehta sir. When is the right time to start the preparation? Most of the students are having this question.
Well, I personally feel that, you know, as to from when you have to start your preparation again depends from uh, students to students. And this I'm saying from my experience when I used to be in college. I was a student of Delhi University, St. Stephen's College, and there we had large number of students who were writing the exams. But many of them, I saw that they cracked the exam in the very first go and they had not spent too much of time. But on an average, I would say that people did work for almost 1 full year to prepare for the examinations. In fact, I must say that even in my case, when I was doing my MA, I had in fact I was neglecting my MA papers because I was concentrating on the civil services preparation. And it took me 1 full year to prepare. And that too, after everything, I could only make it to the income tax in my first go. In my second attempt, I reached the interview, but didn't qualify. My name was nowhere in the list. And it is my last attempt that I made it to the I.A.S. So preparation, of course, I think uh, whenever you start, it is better to give time. But what I feel is that your preparation, a lot of hard work and a lot of, I would say it's a game of perseverance in the sense that it has to be absolute commitment uh, to studies when you're preparing for the examinations.
Again, thank you, sir. Again, the next question is for you. What is the importance of current affairs and how to read the newspaper?
Well, current affairs is something that you need to be abreast of because that there are you have to handle the general studies papers, and there, unless and until you have information on current affairs, you are at a position of disadvantage. When you go for your interview, also many of the questions are basically current issues, whether national or international. And it is only after you read the newspapers, the magazines, listen to some of the scholarly articles, that you are able to develop a particular viewpoint, you are able to defend the viewpoint. Of course, I personally feel that when you reach the interview stage, it is not as much of your knowledge that is tested, but I think how much of clarity of thinking you have, whether if you take a particular stance, are you able to defend your position without being unmindful of any other school of thought. So you need to be absolutely updated on the current affairs issues, both national as well as international. And especially as Mr. Bajaj was mentioning, if you have law as a paper, uh, many of the law issues are something which have a relationship with current affairs. Like if there is some question, the fast track special courts, if you don't know what has happened, in the recent past on the POXO Act, then things like how Nirvaya Fund came into play. So these are all related to actual happenings in the society. So if you have law also as one of your optionals, all the more you need to have proper knowledge of current affairs. Even for a paper like sociology or political science, in many cases you can give examples of what is happening both in the within the country as well as internationally to substantiate what you are writing in the in your answers.
Thank you very much, sir. The next question is for Jasbir Singh Bajaj, sir. Is law optional scoring?
Well, friends, law optional, I have considered, going by my own experience, it is like mathematics. If you are able to cover the entire, the gamut of the question in few words, like, we have word limit, 150 or 200 words. And if you are able to write every aspect of the answer, I mean, the question which is asked in your answer, covering the various legal aspects, including the case laws, it is almost, like mathematics. If you get almost 100% marks, it's one of the most scoring, and going by the success rate, we have seen the highest number of students, aspirants, clearing the exam with law as their optional. That is very, very highly scoring. But only thing is your understanding, and you must have an in-depth knowledge and also application of law as per the question which is asked to you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The next question is again for you, sir. Can students of non-law background choose law as their optional?
Well, again, going by my own experience, I was a science student. I did BSc from Delhi University, but then passion for law, systematic, focused study, and help of great teachers and mentors. Professor Upendra Bakshi, Professor Moolchand Sharma, they were my teachers when I was preparing for the I.A.S. So if you have the right teacher, the right mentor, the right guide, and you understand law, don't mug up the law. You understand the basics of law, its application, and how the judiciary comes out with proper interpretation. If you learn that art, I always say LAW is learn the art of writing. So if you learn the art of writing and you express yourself in the proper manner, then of course your previous academic background will not be of much relevance, but only law will take you through. Thank you.
Again, sir, the second question, again, the next question is for you, sir. Students are asking, a lot of students are having this confusion. Like, can they prepare this law as an optional for civil services with the judicial preparation?
Preparing for judicial examinations is entirely a different ball game as compared to civil services. There are two differences. One is the syllabus is entirely different. The focus in civil services is mainly on constitutional law, administrative law, then a part of law of crimes, law of torts, and law of contract and mercantile law, whereas that is substantive laws. But in the case of judicial examination, the focus is mainly on the procedural laws, CRPC, CPC, Evidence Act, etc. So there's a lot of difference. Second thing is that you have to be your answers have to be very concise, and you must write only the relevant part and restrict yourself to the prescribed word limit. That is the main difference between the two examinations. They are entirely different. The approach is entirely different. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The next question is for Varun Mehta, sir. Sir, how to choose optional? Most of the students are struggling with this.
Well, That's a very difficult question for me to answer because we have one example before us in the form of Mr. Bajaj, who had a science background and he took law as one of his papers. And here I am, I was a student of history, and I took sociology as one of my papers because, there was, I mean to say, again from humanities, something where, if you are abreast with what is happening in the society, the dynamics of the society, the happenings in the society, that all gets captured by sociology. But our times, we also used to go in for optionals by seeing which optionals are more scoring. Now, if Mr. Bajaj's analysis shows that law is more scoring, then one can go in for that. The second thing, we also used to think that what is going to be the gap between my first optional paper and my second optional paper, because if I have a gap of 4 or 5 days, then I have better time to revise in those 4 or 5 days. Because I remember during our times, history and sociology used to be papers which used to take place exactly one day after each other, and it used to put us under a lot of stress and tension. While those who had papers like psychology, they had a long gap of 12 days, so they could, prepare in a very, very relaxed manner. So I think selection of optionals is something which I feel should be guided more by what subject the student is conversant with or will be more comfortable with, and then he can work out the strategy also, whether it is a scoring paper, whether he can get some help and mentoring from some others, if there is a gap between two papers. These are the factors. And of course, I must say I am quite antiquated to the exam now because it's almost 35 years back, and I've not sort of remained in touch with how the exams are being conducted. So please don't depend on my advice. I would
Barun, one correction. Barun, one correction.
Yeah.
Now we have now the students have only one optional. We used to have two optionals.
Yeah.
So there's only one optional now.
So that substantiates my ignorance of today's examination system of civil services.
So again, the last question is for you, Jasbir Singh Bajaj sir, आपके लिए है. Most of the students are struggling, like switching over the optionals. One year they have chosen the other optional. The second year, when they are not able to score good marks, so they are changing the options. So is it advisable?
No, it is not at all advisable to keep on changing, switching over from one optional to another, because if you have already opted for one subject in your previous attempt, you have already built up your knowledge base. The only thing is, if you are not able to clear the exam in that attempt, then better you build up on that and correct your mistakes wherever you have committed earlier. So it's not at all advisable to keep on changing your optionals if you do not clear the exam in the previous attempt. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. We are having a lot of more questions, but because we are constraint of time, so it is requested to the students that please contact BN by I.A.S. At the email info@BN by I.A.S. and there we can answer your other questions that we were not able to take up. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Ashwini Sivan for vote of thanks.
Good evening to one and all. Good evening. Good evening. Am I audible? I hope I am.
Yes.
Yeah. Good evening. Good evening. Yeah. Thank you very much. It is indeed my pride, privilege, and honor to extend a vote of thanks for this very, educative and didactic event. I am short of words, to extend this vote of thanks to these stalwarts who are on the screen right now. I am a, assistant professor and a fledgling unit of this C, the kind of stalwarts are there on the screen. I feel very short of words, to be very honest with the audience. But as
Sunil, you are not assistant professor now. You are senior assistant professor. Don't forget.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
ताजे हो आप तो यार.
Thank you, sir.
अच्छी सी पार्टी भी नहीं ली तेरे से.
Right, sir. Right. Thank you for the motivation, sir. Thank you for encouraging words. Well, this job of extending the word of thanks is really a very tough and difficult job if taken seriously. And I would try to do my best in a short span of time. Well, after listening and, after keenly observing both the panelists, I have to say that, and I'm reminded of the quote of William Arthur Ward, the American motivational writer, who had once said that a mediocre teacher tells, a good teacher explains, and the superior teacher demonstrates, and the great teacher actually inspires. So, the panelists with us today, they have the reflection of all these attributes in them. They have told us the factual underpinnings of civil services preparation with the law exam or with the law optional. They have explained us beautifully, specifically Varun Mehta sir in his, in his discussion, he specifically explained us and navigated us to the challenges that a civil servant faces, but when he has a law background, he does not feel those things very difficult, like revenue matters or his own stint at the defense production, his own stint at revenue department. So I feel that he has explained us beautifully the importance and the significance of the law as a subject for preparation of the civil services. Then if I come to demonstration, I feel and I would like to specifically and emphatically tell that the presentation of Mr. Jasbir Singh Bajaj is a demonstrative in itself, because he has come up with the with the empirical study of year 2015 to 2017, where he has shown us some statistics and figures that the law students are performing well, right? And finally, I see a personality trait of a great teacher in them, who are inspiring us and motivating us, our students, to do well in the studies and to take up a law optional and to crack the civil services examination and be a good civil servant tomorrow and serve the nation well. So thank you so very much to both the panelists here, first and foremost. I would also like to extend my heartfelt thanks to the Honorable Professor in charge, Law Center 2, Faculty of Law, University of Delhi, Professor Mahavir Singh, who is our beloved professor in charge, very cooperative, very dynamic, very helpful, and available throughout the week, throughout the year, whenever he is contacted for any event. Thank you so much for extending support, sir, specifically to this committee which organizes such panel discussions, that is Panel Discussion Committee. I would also like to extend thanks to the convener of the Panel Discussion Committee, Professor Vageshwari Deshwal. She is very dynamic professor of gender justice, criminal law, and a very prolific writer on this subject in the popular media and popular newspapers. Thank you so very much, Vageshwari ma'am. I would also like to thank CEO BN by and I.A.S. Sunita Suman ma'am for taking this opportunity or giving us this opportunity and giving your valuable input.
5 minutes.
Specifically the questions, the students who have posed the questions, I find that very helpful for our audience today. Lastly, I take this opportunity to thank each one of you who have joined us for this event this evening. And finally, one last thanks goes to the organizing committee. We have an organizing team of the panel discussion committee. We have very dynamic teachers in this committee. So thanks to all. Thank you very much.